So we're on Kedusha and Daf Zion. I'm at Aleph, and I just want to go in on one little sugya and get some depth in on how to read a Rashi, brought to you by Tosafot. So, Amar Rav, we're discussing how men can marry women. So that's how Kiddushin works. Different Kinyanim. I joke it could be called Masechet Kinyanim, but maybe this sugya is why it's not called that. Maybe this is why it's called Masechet Kiddushin. Marava hikadshi li lechatziai mikudeshet. If a man says, "You, the lady, you should marry half of me, and all of you loves half of me, accept this ring or other thing of value, and let's solemnize our marriage through that." Mikudeshet, it works. Chetziach mikudeshet li. What about half of you, lady, should become mikudash to me? Eina mikudeshet. That doesn't work. Man can't marry half of a woman. So Sugya continues. Amrle Abaye l'Rava. Abaye asks Rava, Maishna chetziach mikudeshet li de'ena mikudeshet. Why? What's the difference between the man saying half of me marries you, and the woman says, or the woman agrees to the statement, half of you will marry me? So the answer is, it says in the Torah, Isha Amar Rachmana. V'lo chetzi Isha. It says in the Torah, Ki yikach ish isha. A man marries a woman, and then not half of a woman. So Abaye says, okay, well, hachinami ish Amar Rachmana. V'lo chetzi ish. In the same pasuk, it says, Ki yikach ish isha. You would have thought it meant 100% of a man, not 50% of a man. That's what it says in the Torah. So, Amar le, Rava says back to him, Hachi hashta. What's going on? Hatam ita l'veitre lo chazia. Rava says there's no such thing as one woman marrying multiple men. That can't be. Elagavra milo chazia l'veitre. But the truth of the matter is, according to Torah law, without the takana or the chera of Rabbeinu Gershom, one man could theoretically marry multiple wives. The hachi kamar la. And so when he said, half of me will marry you, he said those words, but they didn't literally mean half of him. They meant as follows. We'll explain what they mean. Di ba'ina leminsav achriti nisivna. If I want to marry a second wife, I will. He's telling her up front, these are the terms of our marriage. She can decide she doesn't like them and not accept the Kiddushin. But he's being upfront about what his real desires are. Okay, that could be a good thing, to be upfront and honest. So, Amar le marzutra be'bere de Rav Mari le Ravina. So much later, several generations later in the Amoraim, they were discussing this back and forth of Rava and Abaye. And really, actually, the pattern of this daf is Abaye and Rava. Really, every sugya starts with Rava. Later, then they get discussed by the later Amoraim. So this pattern continues here, and we're getting to the omek pshat, what's going on off the Daf Yomi. Marzutra says to Ravina, "V'nif shetula kiddushay bechula." When he does kiddushin on half of her, Abaye and Rava said it doesn't work. He says, why doesn't it work? Milo Tanya, because there's another case of Kedusha being done on half of a body, and the Kedusha spreads through from 50% to 100%. Ha'omer regla shel zo ola tehe kula ola. If someone takes an animal and says the animal's leg, the whole leg, which is very difficult for an animal to live without if you removed its whole leg. So in that case, the Kedusha spreads throughout the whole animal. Va'afilu leman damar in kula ola. There is an opinion that not the whole animal becomes an ola. That's only if the person was mikadesh an amount of the animal that the life of the animal does not depend on. For example, let's say from below the animal equivalent of the knee towards the foot, well, that's less important. The animal needs it. It has monetary value. You can sell that part of the animal on the market. If you're makdish a significant portion of the animal, including, let's say, half the animal, the Kedusha spreads throughout the whole thing. So similarly, he's saying, when the man says to the woman, I want half of you to become mikudash to me, the Kedusha of that Kiddushin should spread throughout the whole woman if it was Cha in the first place. So Midami, so we discuss and we say, well, wait a second. You can't compare the case of the animal getting the Kedusha of the Korban to become a sacrifice on the Mizbeach to the case of a woman accepting Kiddushin. Hatam behema, hacha dat acheret. The animal is your animal. It has no say in the matter. Maybe it wouldn't want to become a Korban if you asked it. But a woman, she can decide to accept the Kiddushin. She gets to decide the terms of it. So far, if the only thing she's accepting is Kiddushin on half of her, it does not automatically spread farther than she says. And that's why it doesn't work at all. So halo damya, if you want to compare it to something, we do have a case of Kedusha that it is comparable to. Kedusha if you have an animal owned 50-50 by two partners, so one partner is makdish his half, and then the second partner is makdish his half, so it does get kadosh, in the sense that now, let's say they did both Kiddushin of an Ola or the Kedusha of an Ola. So the animal should be an Ola, but it can't, because half of an animal isn't a Korban. And after a period of time, the whole animal became kadosh, the Kedusha Ola. But in the meantime, it was unsuitable for a Korban after it entered the game. So it becomes nidche from being able to be a Korban. So it can't be kreva. And however, it has Kedusha in the sense it can make tumura. If someone tries to exchange it for another animal, the Kedusha grabs onto both of them and makes the other animal kadosh as well. And the animal that has its Kedusha has the same problem of dichui. You can't offer it itself as a Korban. You have to sell it and buy with that a new animal to be the Ola. The sugya continues. Shma mina tzlat, and we'll read this. Shma mina tzlat. There are three things we see from this. Balei chayim nidachim. Animals can become nidche, have dichui applied to them. The alternative would be maybe the animal needs to be shechted, to be that far in the game for it to say, oh, this wasn't suitable for a korban temporarily. You can never come back to it. Ushomi dichui miikara have a dichui. Dichui from the beginning is a dichui. Once it enters play, if it enters play as unsuitable, well, then it can't become suitable. An example would be hadas is one of the species for Sukkot. So if hadas has certain berries on it, it's not kosher. So if the hadas has berries on it before Sukkot, well, Sukkot hasn't started yet. Just remove the berries and it's kosher. But if the berries grow on the hadas before Sukkot and then Sukkot starts, if you hold dichui miikara, then it started Sukkot as a pasul hadas and you can't remove the berries. Flip side, let's say you didn't, then you could remove the berries. We say it was never kosher for Sukkot, these hadasim. So I remove the berries and now I get a brand new born again hadas. But even according to that opinion, if you had a kosher hadas on Sukkot, and then it grew the berries, then it would become pasul, and it would be nidcha, and you could never make it a kosher hadas ever again. That there's dichui not just on the kedusha haguf of a real korban, but the dichui on the kedusha damim of the korban here. So what this means is that the kedusha, or the kiddushin, in the case of a man marrying a woman, it doesn't work because of the dichui, that it's impossible to marry half of a woman. And so even if later she agrees, what she says, now I want to have the second half become kadosh. Okay, so that wouldn't work because the first half is illegitimate. And that means even so is the second half. It doesn't work. Now let's read a Rashi. Nifshet Kedusha B'Kula. The question of Mar Zutra was, why doesn't the Kiddushin spread throughout the whole land? Ki Amar Chatziach Mikudeshet Li. When he says, half of you should become holy to me, holy, kadosh, married, Deha Mikudeshet Bilashon Hekdesh Kamarla. He uses the language of Hekdesh. So we were wondering, if he uses the language of Hekdesh, of Kiddushin, not Kinyanim, Masechet Kiddushin, why doesn't it follow the rules of Hektish to have the Kedusha spread throughout the whole, from the half to the whole of the woman? So I wonder, why did Rashi use so many words? Well, let's look at Tosafot. Tosafot Tema, the Beresh Tamura, Yalif Regla, Shal Zo Ola, Udvar Shashom Tliabo, Mikra. So first of all, Tosafot would say, wait a second. We were discussing Kedusha spreading out the whole animal. That isn't an inherent din of how Kedusha works. It's learned that from a pasuk, that that's how it works for animals. So how can you say so simply that the same thing is true in the case of a woman getting married to someone else? That's a separate area of halacha. You at the very least would want a separate drasha. Now, it could be, I want to say this up front, is that because he's using the language of Kiddushin, it could be he's saying we're going to follow the rules of that separate area of halacha. Kol asher yiten mimenu l'Hashem, take part of it to Hashem, the whole goes to Hashem. That's how the drasha works. Gabi isha lo kativ krai. There's no pasuk like this for getting from marriage. So why is the question of Mar Sutra a good question? You can my parich ha lo damu la dadi. So if so, how can the question be asked on the question of Mar Sutra that, wait a second, that's not a precise comparison, but this other thing is a precise comparison that accepts the assumption that we're able to go from the world of Kiddushin between a man and a woman to the world of Hektish between an animal becoming a korban on the Mizbeach. We accepted that assumption of Mar Sutra. So v'nira de lakach diktek Rashi. This is why Rashi was very careful. Upirish deha mikudeshet b'lashon hekdesh ka'amar la. He used the language of Kiddushin to do the Kiddushin in Masechet Kiddushin. Udamar b'reish pirkin de'asar la akuli almay kehekdesh. That the rabbis called this stage of marriage Kiddushin because it makes the woman usher to the whole world like Hekdesh, meaning it's like Hekdesh. Adam ose ota ke Hekdesh, implicitly, that it follows the rules of Hekdesh because it's using the language of Hekdesh. This is a very, very big and surprising path to go down. But Tosafot do. Lefikach yesh liot dina ke Hekdesh. Because they're using the language of Hekdesh, the din, the halacha, the law should be like that of Hekdesh. Aval, im haya omer mi'oreset, chad mehanu lishni delel. So earlier we said there are other languages of affecting Kiddushin. You don't have to say harayat mikudeshetli, even though the custom for the last 2,000 years, perhaps, has been to use that language of Kiddushin, harayat mikudeshetli, of Masechet Kiddushin, that it's one of Kedusha, patterned off the Kedusha of, let's say, the Mizbeach, of the temple. So Al-Zeh Lohaya Makshet. Mar Sutra wouldn't have asked his question if the marriage had been contracted using one of those other language of, how about, can I marry half of you? He would never have said, if you marry half a woman, then the Kedusha should spread to the whole woman. Benishatu Kiddushe Behula Laperish. He would never have said it according to his other language of Harat Muresetli, only says it according to the language of Harat Mekudeshet. Very interesting. And so, the Maskana, what I want to point out is that the reason why it doesn't work is because it's like a dich, as in the attempted marriage fails. Even when he says, how about half of you become Mikudesh Li? Because there's a dichli, it's not suitable to be married to half of a woman. It's not suitable. And it stops there because she, with her dot and awareness of what's going on and her consent, let's say, to the marriage, is only until half. So she stops the Kedusha at half and it doesn't extend throughout all of her. And that's why if later she says, okay, let's do the second half now, well, that marriage doesn't work. You have to then go back and redo the whole thing. I don't think we would say they can never get married. That would be like a real dichuli, but they would have to hit a hard restart on the whole process. Okay, Kedushin Daf Zayin. I just have to say today I attended a siyum on Shas by Riva Preil. It was very inspiring. We should all be inspired to keep learning every day, and to finish Shas along with all the other Daf Yomi learners, and Hatzlacha to everyone. Mazal Tov Riva. We should all be strengthened.